Welcome to the Skeptic Zone, the podcast from Australia for science and reason.
Hello and welcome to the Skeptic Zone, episode number 298 for the 6th of July 2014. Richard Saunders here with you from the San Francisco Bay Area. Just putting my feet up, or putting my feet down actually, and doing a lot of walking around the Bay Area while I get ready for the amazing meeting which starts in just a few days in Las Vegas. More about that in the coming weeks, where I'll be sure to be bringing you many interviews with some of the interesting skeptics and other people that go to the amazing meeting. Might even get an interview with James Randi himself. And speaking of James Randi, I talk about James Randi a little later on in the show. Let's do this in sort of higgledy-piggledy order. At the end of this week's show, there's a radio interview with me. I was here in the San Francisco area, sort of channel surfing on my internet radio, where I happened to hear one of the Sydney announcers talking about John Edward and Talking with the Dead. I gave him a call and, for the next 20 minutes or so, he interviewed me about all sorts of things, and we took some callback. That's coming up at the end of this week's show, me on Australian radio with presenter Luke Boner. What else is coming up in this week's show? Well, we got a week in science, of course, from the Royal Institution of Australia, as we always do. We have a guest reporter, Kevin Davies from Canberra, who did a wonderful job in helping put together the Australian Skeptics National Convention last year. Kevin's going to be talking to Kylie Walker from the Australian Academy of Science about helping to promote women in science. Promoting women in science coming up somewhere in the middle of this week's episode. But we're going to kick off. We're going to start with Evidence, Please, with Jo Alabaster. What's in your food? That's what I want to know. What's in your food? Food additives. What's going on with food additives? Are they good for you? Are they bad for you? What does the science say? Evidence, Please, with Jo Alabaster. Now, I tried some interesting food a few days ago down in downtown San Francisco. There's a new store opened. I think it's called Pepper Palace. Pepper Palace. It's, talk about a moth to the flame. It's a whole store devoted to hot chili sauces. My goodness me. Oh, my goodness me. So, of course, I couldn't resist. I had a look, tried a few. Woof. I tried their flashbang sauce, and they don't call it flashbang for nothing. I've had some hot sauces in my times, folks. Dave's Insanity sauce, some of you might know that. That's been a long-time favourite. But this stuff was like nothing I'd ever tried before. Certainly the hottest hot sauce I've ever tasted. But it's always nice to wander around San Francisco and have that famous clam chowder in the sourdough bowl. Some more from me at the end of the show about the Vaccination Chronicles documentary and the amazing meeting. But right now it's time for me to run upstairs, look in the fridge, not for chili sauce, but for some nice calming, soothing vanilla yogurt, which does wonders after you've eaten chili sauce. While I do that, I hope you enjoy the Skeptic Zone. What we want is some more evidence, please. Here's Jo Alabaster.
Hello, this is Jo Alabaster. Here in Australia, food authorities have deemed that common allergens, such as crustaceans, eggs, fish, milk, peanuts, soybeans, tree nuts, sesame seeds, and their products, must be declared in product ingredient lists clearly in order to allow consumers to be aware of their presence and avoid them as they need to. Royal jelly is another allergen which, while uncommon, must be noted on labels as an ingredient due to the seriousness of allergic reactions. Gluten and sulfites also feature on ingredients lists for the sake of people with medically diagnosed conditions such as celiac disease and sulfite intolerance. Alongside these better-known and understood ingredients of potential concern to people with medical conditions involving allergies and sensitivities, Australia also has a list of 5 ingredients which must be noted on a separate advisory and warning statement. Often found in a large typeface near the ingredient list, the 5 items are aspartame, which is labelled as contains phenylalanine, added caffeine in cola drinks, which are labelled contains caffeine, guarana, also contains caffeine, quinine, contains quinine, unpasteurised egg and milk products, which are labelled as unpasteurised. Today I'd like to take a look at these ingredients, whether we should be concerned by their presence in the products that we eat and drink, and why it is that we label them. Of the substances which require mandatory advisory warning statements here in Australia, none are surrounded by as much controversy and misinformed concern as the artificial sweetener aspartame. It was first synthesised in 1965 and sold under the brand name NutraSweet, though the patent expired in 1992. Many claims have been made over the years about the dangers of aspartame, and as a result it is one of the most highly scrutinised food additives, the subject of numerous animal studies, clinical and epidemiological research, as well as post-marketing surveillance. And yet the anti-aspartame claims don't go away. Google aspartame and the second search result is Mercola's website, in which he claims that aspartame causes everything from slurred speech to numbness to depression, and chronic illnesses such as mental retardation, birth defects, lymphoma, Parkinson's disease and multiple sclerosis can be triggered or worsened by the ingestion of aspartame. Yet another case of anything syndrome. The aspartame controversy, as it's dubbed, has been around since it was first approved for human consumption by the FDA, fueled by dodgy media reports, the most famous being US 60 Minutes episode in which it was suggested that there was a causal link between brain tumours and aspartame. No such link has ever been found. An unsourced hoax email written by a non-existent Nancy Markle, which claims a conspiracy between Monsanto and the FDA, and a seemingly endless run of anti-aspartame memes spread via social media. Public pressure driven by fear and misinformation has had an effect on the market. Several supermarket chains worldwide have removed aspartame from their own brand products. Likewise, concerns about aspartame have driven food authorities worldwide to conduct studies, more studies, and re-evaluations of studies on the safety of aspartame. Alongside MSG, aspartame is one of the world's most studied food additives. The results? Aspartame poses no toxicity concerns for consumers at current levels of exposure. FDA officials have described aspartame as, quote, one of the most thoroughly tested and studied food additives the agency has ever approved, end quote, and its safety as, quote, clear-cut, end quote. So why has aspartame earned a spot on the advisory and warning statements list? While aspartame presents no health concerns for the vast majority of consumers, there is a medical condition which requires an awareness of its presence. The genetic disorder phenylketonuria, or PKU, occurs when 2 mutated copies of the PKU gene fail to produce the enzyme which metabolizes the amino acid phenylalanine, a component of aspartame. PKU is a serious condition, and in many countries it is screened for with a heel prick test at birth. In Australia, the incidence of PKU in newborns is around 1 in 10,000. With detection and treatment, children with PKU can grow and develop normally, but left undetected and untreated, excess levels of phenylalanine accumulate in the blood and cause brain damage. An infant can develop severe intellectual disability, abnormalities in brain function, mood disorders, irregular motor function, microcephaly, and behavioural issues. As such, people diagnosed with PKU must be carefully monitored and diligently follow a phenylalanine-restricted diet, while supplementing with a medical formula containing amino acids and other nutrients. It is vital to the health of people with PKU and their carers that they be aware of any phenylalanine contained within foods and beverages consumed, hence the labelling of aspartame. Another substance on the advisory and warning statements list is caffeine, be it added to cola or in the form of guarana, the seeds of which contain around twice the concentration of caffeine as coffee beans. Caffeine is also found in tea, energy drinks, chocolate products, and, believe it or not, there are trace amounts still found in decaf coffee. While caffeine isn't necessarily bad in and of itself, people may wish to pay attention to how much they're consuming. Caffeine is a stimulant which acts on the brain and nervous system, and it is possible to develop caffeine dependency. Withdrawal symptoms can include tiredness, crankiness, headaches, sweating, and muscle pain. Depending on an individual's sensitivity, caffeine can interfere with sleep, cause anxiety, and in excessive doses, palpitations and trembling. Pregnant women should discuss their caffeine intake with their doctor. And while there are no official guidelines regarding children's caffeine intake, parents should be aware that it can cause symptoms such as irritability, sleeplessness, and stomach upset. The labelling of caffeine allows us to monitor our intake as we see fit. Perhaps I should declare a potential invested interest here. Much caffeine has gone into the writing of this report. I haven't yet been offered a sponsorship deal from a coffee company, but I suspect it's only a matter of time. Next, quinine. Quinine is a substance with a fascinating history. It has fever-reducing, analgesic, anti-inflammatory, and anti-malarial properties, and occurs naturally in the bark of the cinchona tree. Cinchona bark was used as a traditional medicine in Peru and Bolivia before being brought to Europe in the 17th century and remained a primary anti-malarial drug of choice until the 1940s. Quinine has a distinct bitter flavour, most recognisable in tonic water, which was indeed developed as a tonic, intended for use as a prophylactic against malaria. In the early 1800s, a British officer in colonial India came up with the idea of adding gin to tonic water, in an effort to make the tonic water more palatable. Modern tonic water tends to have a lower quinine content than the original medicinal tonic water, and is often sweetened with sugar or artificial sweeteners. Indeed, the FDA in the USA have limited the quinine content of tonic water to 83 milligrams per litre. Therapeutic doses are in the range of 500 to 1,000 milligrams. Quinine itself is often synthesized these days, but there are still natural quinine products, which have precisely the same chemical makeup as synthesized quinine, on the market. In the past, quinine was listed on the Australian Pharmaceutical Benefits Scheme as a medication for reducing the severity and frequency of nighttime leg cramps. This recommendation was revoked in 2004 due to its efficacy being marginal at best and an unfavourable harm-benefit profile. Quinine is still prescribed as part of some anti-malarial treatments. The use for therapeutic doses of quinine is associated with many risks, however, and patients should be monitored carefully for signs and symptoms of adverse events. Consumer products containing very low amounts of quinine carry few risks. When used as a mixer for alcoholic beverages, the alcohol is likely of greater concern. However, there are people with medically diagnosed quinine sensitivities who should avoid or restrict quinine intake as per their doctor's advice. Quinine should also be avoided by people diagnosed with the metabolic disorder glucose 6-phosphate dehydrogenase deficiency, which affects red blood cell metabolism. Finally on the advisory and warning statements list are unpasteurized egg and milk products. The sale of raw milk from cows for human consumption is illegal in Australia, but it can still be sold if labelled as a beauty product. And there are some consumers out there who are willing to seek it out under the misheld belief that pasteurization of milk renders it less healthy to consume. Quite the opposite's true. It is, however, possible to purchase raw goat's milk for human consumption. Some cheeses made with unpasteurized cow's milk have been approved for production by Food Standards Australia New Zealand, following risk assessment. Of course, raw eggs are the norm on our shelves, though pasteurized egg products for cooking purposes can be found in some supermarket dairy cabinets. Unpasteurized egg and milk run a high risk of contamination with pathogens. Salmonella can be present in uncooked eggs, Salmonella, Campylobacter jejuni, Listeria and E. coli in raw milk and soft cheeses, Toxoplasmosis, the cat poo pathogen, in raw goat's milk. People who choose to consume unpasteurized dairy and eggs should be aware of the risk of serious poisoning that comes with their decision, particularly if they are elderly, in any way infirm, or planning on giving such foods to children under their care. None of these groups of people are able to handle the resulting illness well. Guidelines recommend that pregnant women should take special care to avoid consuming unpasteurized egg and milk products, as Salmonella, Listeria, and Toxoplasmosis can all have detrimental effects on pregnancies. Food labelling is a tricky topic to navigate. Without understanding the context by which it is required, consumers can experience undue alarm due to a mandated warning that a product contains aspartame. Equally, we can be misled by claims placed on products by manufacturers, such as contains no MSG, natural, light or organic. Perhaps the best we can do is to improve our understanding of the risks, benefits and dodgy claims made about varying ingredients and food additives. I hope that this report has been informative. If you have any concerns about the ingredients that I've mentioned, have a chat with your GP or a qualified dietitian.
Hallo aan alle Nederlandse luisteraars. Op dit moment bent u aan het luisteren naar de Skeptic Zone, voor wetenschap en kritisch nadenken. Voor meer informatie ga naar www.skepticzone.tv.
Welcome to a Week in Science from RiAus, bringing you the science you need to know. Our obsession with cake is never ending, but did you know how much science is involved in every piece? Firstly, let's look at the role of each ingredient in making your piece of cake nice and fluffy, starting with sugar. When you cream butter and sugar together, air gets trapped on the rough surface of the sugar crystals, giving you a foamy batter. The fat in the butter coats these air bubbles, helping to hold them in the mixture. However, when they heat up, these bubbles pop, leaving you with a flat and dense cake. But that's where eggs come in. The proteins also coat these air bubbles. When these proteins are heated, they harden, stopping the bubble from popping and trapping the air inside the cake. Baking powder is the last ingredient in making your cake nice and fluffy. It is a mixture of bicarbonates of soda and cream of tartar, an alkali and an acid, which react with heat and water to form carbon dioxide. This helps expand those air bubbles, adding yet another level of fluffiness. So what role does flour have then? Well, flour proteins combine to form gluten, which forms a stretchy web structure through the cake. As the air bubbles are expanding, the gluten stretches to contain them. When the gluten reaches about 80 degrees, it hardens, preventing the cake from collapsing inwards and maintaining its expanded shape, leaving you with a light, fluffy cake. The second role of flour is to provide starch. This helps the egg proteins stay strong and trap those air bubbles inside and form the final texture of the cake. And now, 4 fast facts about cakes. Cakes as we know them probably only came about in the 18th or 19th century with the advent of baking powders, replacing yeast as the leavening agent. Some people add salt into cakes. Salty and sweet, what? But it does help strengthen that gluten structure. Despite saying that gluten is vital for creating the structure of the cake, too much gluten can result in a heavy texture. The amount of butter helps control that reaction. And sugar also helps the caramelization reaction, called the Maillard reaction, giving that golden surface on top. That's it for this Week in Science. For more information on the science of baking, sink your sweet tooth into the RiAus website, riaus.org.au. Follow us on Twitter at RiAus and like us on Facebook. I'm Ben Lewis and we'll catch you next week.
Hi, this is Tim Farley. You probably know me from whatstheharm.net, a catalog of the real-world harm caused by lack of critical thinking. But that's not my only project. I present at Skeptic events. I post a daily Skeptic history fact on Twitter and Facebook. And I blog about using new techniques on the internet to advance skepticism. Come over to skeptools.com and check out my latest ideas. But first, enjoy the rest of the Skeptic Zone.
Well, I am here today with Kylie Walker from the Australian Academy of Science. Hello, Kylie.
Hello, how are you today?
I'm very well, thank you. Now, can you tell me, what is the Australian Academy of Science?
The Australian Academy of Science is a fellowship of Australia's most eminent research scientists. It's based on the Royal Society of London, which is the oldest scientific academy in the world. And essentially we represent the scientists who have made significant contributions to the body of knowledge. We spend a lot of time advocating for science, and we also educate people about science at all levels.
And what is your role?
I'm the Director of Communications and Outreach here at the Academy, so I have responsibility for media, publications, events and fundraising.
Now, every year the Academy runs many events for National Science Week, and I understand that you are involved in a very special event. What is this event?
Well, this year we decided to do something a little bit different, and in fact our event's now going to be mainly online. We're running what we're calling the Women of Science Wikibomb, and this is because we noticed that there were many fewer women scientists represented on Wikipedia than there are men scientists represented on Wikipedia. So we're setting out essentially to change that and to raise the profile of Australian women scientists on Wikipedia.
This is a really, really excellent event. Why do you think this has happened, the lack of women scientists on Wikipedia?
We noticed it actually first when we started looking for our own female fellows on Wikipedia, and we realised that a significant proportion of them don't appear there at all, or they appear there with less than 100 words or so on their profiles. So really just stubs. And I think that this has happened because, well, traditionally because there are more senior male scientists still than there are female scientists, and that's a historical artefact which we're working very hard to change. We don't have as much of a cultural understanding of the contribution of women to science through the ages. So we've all heard of, Albert Einstein, we've all heard of Newton, and we've all heard of probably of Frank Fenner, to cite an Australian example. But ask people to talk about women scientists and you might get a Marie Curie. You might, at an absolute push, get an Elizabeth Blackburn as our most recent Nobel laureate, but the knowledge just isn't there.
Okay. Is it possible for members of the skeptical community to get involved with your event? And if so, how?
Oh, absolutely. We would like anybody and everybody to get involved. We're very welcoming to all comers. So it's very easy to get involved. You go to our website, which is science.org.au, and there'll be a clear link to the Women of Science Wikipedia page. And we ask you to register there. We have the opportunity for 35 people to come and participate in the event in person at the Shine Dome here in Canberra. And we'll have a bit of fun with that because we're going to invite some senior women Australian scientists to come in through the day and have a chat to participants there. We'll also be doing tours through our archives and looking at some of our dusty relics. If you don't happen to make it to that in-person event, if you can't make it to that in-person event, then you're very welcome to also participate online. And again, you can just sign up via our website.
And when is the event going to be launched?
So we're actually launching it next week, but we're asking people to do the editing in a 24-hour period on the 14th of August. That's just a few days before the beginning of National Science Week this year.
Well, thank you so much for this interview, Kylie. This is truly a worthy cause, and I wish you the best of success. The details of this event will be listed on the Skeptic Zone website. Thank you very much for your time, Kylie.
Thank you, Kevin. It's been a pleasure.
The Skeptic Magazine, the journal from Australian skeptics. Subscribe online to the world's second oldest skeptical magazine. Visit www.skeptics.com.au and click the publications link. You can also find there over 30 years of back issues free to download. The Skeptic, the magazine from Australian skeptics.
It's 3 o'clock. We were talking about John Edwards and Peter Fitzsimon's scathing attack on him. He called him a fraud, so go on, sue me. And the thing is, I think there was a very, very famous skeptic called James Randi. And he's a man I have a lot of time for because he's a very polite bloke. He's an American. He was made famous many, many years ago on the Don Lane show when he was trying to explain. And by the way, he was invited on to the Don Lane show. I thought he was treated pretty badly by Don. He was invited onto the show because there was a psychic that used to be a regular on the Don Lane show called Doris Stokes. And she was a lovely old woman, but she used to claim that she picked up the vibes of dead people and could speak to dead people. And then there was Uri Geller, who's claimed to be able to bend spoons with just thought power. And basically what James Randi was saying, he was saying, look, there is a way There is a way to do this without being psychic. I can use science. I can show you that it's an illusion. Anyway, Don Lane, who was fond of Doris Stokes, told him to piss off. That were his words. He smashed the glass of water that was on the coffee table there. It was quite a scene. And in fact, I think you can see it on YouTube. Don Lane, go to YouTube, Don Lane, James Randi. But anyway, I try and keep an open mind on most things, but I find it very hard to believe that someone can talk to a dead person. But I'm sure there are plenty of listeners who have got experiences where they believe it's actually happened. But this John Edward and Peter Fitzsimons, he's been called a fraud by many, many people, and you've got to ask yourself, why doesn't he sue? I mean, isn't that a defamatory thing to say, calling somebody a fraud? And if we have departments of fair trading here in Australia, if somebody has a product and they make a claim, if somebody makes a claim and they take money and it can't be proven that it's right or not, or if the product is faulty, Department of Fair Trading and Consumer Affairs step in. And Peter Fitzsimons says, why haven't they with this John Edwards, who's coming to Australia in November? Richard Saunders is with the Australian Skeptics Organisation. He's at a skeptics conference in San Francisco, believe it or not, and he was listening to us while he was having his breakfast. It's 9 o'clock in the morning. And he's given us a ring, and I'm glad he has. Richard Saunders, good morning and welcome to New Day Australia.
Good morning from San Francisco. That's right. Of course I tune into you, Luke, no matter where I am in the world.
Yeah, I just wish you had a survey book then.
Oh, well, there you go.
There you go. Okay. Richard, I want to give you the time you deserve here. I've got to say that I am a bit like you. I don't believe in what I can't see and what I can't touch, and there are plenty of magicians out there. And people claiming to be able to talk to people who have passed away has been around for thousands of years. You know, gypsies with crystal balls, etc., etc. But this John Edwards takes a lot of money from people, and Peter Fitzsimons I don't know, did you see his column last Sunday?
I certainly did. It was quite striking. Now, we normally wouldn't go so far as to run around calling people frauds because, one, in a way, it sort of gives them more oxygen. And the reason John Edward doesn't run around suing people like Peter Fitzsimons is, why would he have to? There's no point. John Edward has a very large and loyal band of followers, believers out there. And the damage that Peter Fitzsimons could do to John Edwards hardly comes up on the radar. In fact, it feeds the believers to see, oh, look, and now this horrible man is saying these terrible things about our beloved John Edward. I'm going to see him even more. It's interesting from a psychological point of view. It's an interesting sort of we call it a self-sealing belief. It's an adventure in psychology when you look at these people who claim to talk with the dead and their followers, I think.
Yeah, I don't believe in it. I've seen John Edward. Is it Edward or Edwards?
It's Edward. His name is John Edward McGee.
Okay.
He just dropped off from McGee. That's fine. He can call himself whatever he likes.
Well, I guess somebody packing stadiums, taking money and claiming to talk to the dead and calling themselves Macca doesn't really have the same impetus, does it?
Well, you know what? It wouldn't matter once people believe in this sort of thing. There's an old joke saying once people believe in this sort of thing, then the psychic can stand up on the stage and just read letters of the alphabet, which is what a lot of them do. Strangely enough, I've seen many of these stage shows over the years, and they've been universally poor. But to the believer, they read everything into it they possibly can, and their mind will make lots of connections, and they'll come away. And it's interesting you were talking about the movie Leap of Faith with
Steve Martin.
That was based on a book written by James Randi called The Faith Healers.
Oh, really?
Yeah. It's an incredible book. It goes into all the faith healers that James Randi exposed over the years, and they're terrible, dirty, horrible tricks to con people out of their money. Steve Martin read that book and sort of based the movie around it.
Yes, but in the movie it does rain. And you're left wondering. You know when he disappears, he gets the lift in the truck.
Yeah, that's Hollywood for you. Right?
It did rain. It did rain. After talking about John Edward last week, because he was doing the rounds of all the radio stations, and he came to this one. And, I suppose there's a lot of interest out there, so he makes an interesting radio interview. And I voiced my scepticism on the radio, and a colleague of mine on Canberra's 2CC rang me, and he said, mate, we were listening into you, and he said, would you like to meet a psychic that I know of who I am convinced is fair income? And the bloke who spoke to me is a skeptic as well. Well, I had a phone conversation with this lady, and I've got to be honest with you, Richard, I kept my cards very, very close to my chest. She knew from the onset of our phone conversation I was skeptical, but she said a couple of things that no one would have known, and she was right on the money. It was quite spooky.
Did you happen to record it?
No, I wish I had.
I wish you did too, because, and this is please don't take this the wrong way, this applies universally to just about every human I have ever met. People cannot properly remember a psychic reading. They'll come away and their memory will be embellished. It will be altered every time you call it up.
No, well, the one thing that she said, I remember like as if I had recorded it. When my father passed away 16 years, I hadn't told anyone this. When he passed away 16 years ago, there were 3 speakers delivering eulogies. I was one. Dad's oldest and dearest friend that he knew from the army, 1945, was another one. And there was a young boy from Dad's office that had mentored. Anyway, my mother, unbeknownst to me or anyone, she went up to the young boy who delivered the 3rd eulogy and said, look, I've got Brian's watch here. I thought you might like it. And he rang me many years later. It was about 4 years later. He rang me. Mark was his name. And he said, look, Luke, I don't know whether you know this. Your mum gave me your dad's watch. I said, no, I had no idea. And he said, look, I feel guilty having it because it doesn't mean anything to me. It may mean something to you. And I said, well, I remember it very, very well. And he used to keep it in a little cast iron dish in the shape of a fish. He used to keep his change and his watch. And it was next to his bedside table. I have that dish and I keep my change in that dish. But he said, look, I feel guilty about having this watch. He said, I'd like to give it back to you because it means nothing to me. I think it should be with you. And I said, thank you, Mark. That's very, very good. Well, we never caught up. He never delivered it. And that was about 4 years ago. But I hadn't told anyone that story, Richard.
Mm-hmm.
The last thing this lady said to me, she said, oh, Luke, before you go, I don't know if this means anything to you, but your father wants you to have that watch.
All right. So that's probably...
That was pretty good. That was...
that was... But you've got a big story about the watch. Now, if that didn't happen, then you wouldn't even remember she'd said that. She said something that happened to hit home. Now, if she says that every other time she talks to somebody, every now and then she's going to get an amazing thing with somebody, a family story with a watch. But the important thing to remember is she didn't tell you the story you just told me and the listeners. She simply mentioned the watch, and you put all the rest of the backstory onto it and made it hit home personally.
But now, you can see how I was impressed.
Absolutely. But if something similar happened to me too, it would have been interesting for me to hear that too. But remember, if you didn't have a watch story and she said, "Oh, I need to mention the watch," you might have thought, I can't think of a watch story, and then you probably wouldn't even remember she said that later on.
But it was the big ending. She said, look, before you go, last thing, I've got to tell you this. Like it was like, you know.
And I know how powerful it could be. She could have mentioned that earlier on. It happened to be at the end that's interesting.
It was her punchline.
Well, here's the thing. I sincerely, obviously, being the president of Australian Skeptics, I sincerely doubt this woman has a magical connection with dead people. Dead people are dead. They don't tend to say very much.
But there is a spirit. But a lot of people believe there's a spirit world. Richard, can you hang on?
Yeah.
Because you know how commercial radio works. I've got to pay some bills. Can we talk on the other side of this break?
We can.
Stay right. Richard Saunders has phoned me from San Francisco. He's listening online. He's with the Australian Skeptics Association, and we'll come back and talk. Your thoughts are welcome. Give us a call. 13 13 32 is the telephone number. Maybe you've got a story that Richard can explain. I don't know how much time he's got. What time's your conference start?
Oh, well, it's about a week away, actually.
Oh, you're just over there. You're over there doing a recce, are you?
I'm doing a recce, getting over jet lag, and then actually the conference is run by James Randi, and it's in Las Vegas next week.
Oh, all right, okay, hang on. Well, you stay there. Let me get rid of some commitments, and then we'll come back. 1332. If you'd like to be part of this conversation. In 1332, Richard Saunders from Australian Skeptics has phoned me all the way from San Francisco, listening to the program. Nice to know that someone's listening, Richard.
Oh, I'm sure I must be one of countless thousands.
Hey, listen, Richard, the board's starting to go off. Are you happy to wait till after the news and take some calls?
I can do my best. I can do my best to answer questions. Bear in mind, it's hard for me, almost impossible for me to hear a story about someone will say, oh, they saw the UFO or their psychic told them this, that, and really comment because I wasn't there.
Yeah, I know, but you can. But like James Randi, maybe you can explain how. Yeah, did you see that classic piece of television when James Randi was on Don Lane talking about Doris Stokes?
I saw it live, and I've seen it many
Yeah,
times.
I saw it live too.
Yeah, I'll be when I'm at the conference next week with James Randi. I'll be playing that for the audience. That clip, it's so famous.
It was, I know, and it was such poor form of Don because he invited him on.
Yeah, and James Randi loves to tell the backstory behind that. Don Lane tried to trick Randi to catch him out, and Don wasn't very happy with Randi at all in that situation.
Yeah, well, how did he try and trick him out?
Well, he invited him on. This is according to James Randi, of course. Don invited James Randi on the show to talk about these matters. And now James Randi, like I do, I love to bend spoons. It's a great trick. In fact, I bent a spoon for you many years ago on a radio station, I seem to remember.
You came in. That's right. Where were you? Another radio station. That's right. Yeah, you came in and you bent a spoon right in front of me.
That's right. And you now, yeah. That looks like I could have said to you, if I came in as Richard Saunders, the great psychic, and bent the spoon, you might have been running away scratching your head. But I made it clear to you it was a trick. I didn't tell you how the trick was done. Anyway, Don Lane said, come on the show, James Randi, and bend some spoons and do this. And Randi said, look, I don't want to do that magic. I'd rather just talk about this thing. And as soon as Randi got on the show, there were the spoons. So Don Lane was trying to put Randi on the spot in that situation.
Yeah. All right. Look, I like to have an open mind. I never say never. I mean, here we are. It's 4 minutes to 3 o'clock all around Australia. We're broadcasting to. We're probably going to get a few funny calls, but I mean, can somebody speak to dead people? Is there a spirit world that you can tap into? And you say, Richard, that no, that's it's. Are you saying definitely not, or it hasn't been proven to your satisfaction?
Oh, it hasn't been proven to my satisfaction. I would probably say most certainly, probably not.
Okay.
There's no reason for me to believe.
All right. Well, if you've got a story you'd like to convince Richard, or maybe he can explain how it was done, give us a call now, 1332. Richard Saunders from Australian Skeptics has phoned me all the way from San Francisco. We will take a break. News is next, and we'll come back with your calls. Last hour, we were talking about the scathing article that Fairfax journalist columnist Peter Fitzsimons filed in his Sunday paper talking about John Edward, who is coming to Australia in November, and he's done a promotional tour and he's spoken on this radio station, I know. And, he just, if you watch his crossing over program, listen to what he has to say, I mean, you either believe wholeheartedly that he can talk to dead people and can tune into one of your dead relatives and tell you how they're going. As Peter Fitzsimons says, he says that he can talk to dead people and he can give you the lowdown on how your dead ones are doing, and invariably they're doing pretty well. Listening to my conversation and my editorial all the way from San Francisco is Richard Saunders, who is with the Australian Skeptics, and he's phoned through to the program and been good enough to give us some time this morning. Richard, welcome back.
Hello.
It's good. He's there. Yeah. Welcome back. Thanks for waiting on. You said that you were happy to take a couple of calls and try and explain how these people do these things. Now, we mentioned that movie, Leap of Faith.
Yeah.
Now, in that movie, Steve Martin plays a preacher. He's not a Pentecostal preacher. What would you call him? An evangelistic.
Yeah, sort of evangelistic, charismatic.
Show pony.
Song and dance, getting people's emotions whipped up, getting them carried away in a little bit of hysteria. Yeah, something like that.
Yeah. And he visits small towns that are struggling, takes money off people, and he claims he can cure them, make them walk, do all that sort of thing. And basically it's a show, and we see that because he has a team of staff going into the audience, and they already know a lot about the so-called victims. He has an earpiece. He has somebody in a van in a sound van talking to him, and that sort of thing really happens.
It really happens. Well, I'll say that it really happened. Those stories were based on real events that James Randi exposed. Faith healers have learned something from James Randi over the years, and they've learned that they don't have to so much rely on tricks in order to convince people that they're really in contact with supernatural forces or they're healing them. They've discovered that people will simply believe that anyway, and they don't have to rely on so many tricks. People can just roll up. I mean, a lot of people have got very good hearts and are very entrusting in their religion, and they'll turn up believing that they're, communicating with their certain God or whatever it may be. And these are nice, decent people. And the people who take advantage of people like that have a different moral compass to you and I. They really do. And
a really good point in the movie is when the sheriff, who really doesn't want this bloke in town because he's genuinely concerned for the welfare of the townsfolk who are doing it tough in the middle of a drought. And he gets the dirt on Steve Martin's character, and he interrupts the service. And he reads out his rap sheet, grand theft auto at an early age, and it just goes on and on and on and on. And Steve Martin turns it around and says, "Yeah, that's true. I was a sinner, and now I have seen the way." And the crowd loved it.
Yeah. But it's hard for these people to put a foot wrong. And you wouldn't believe it. The guy that Randy exposed many years ago, his name was Peter Popoff. He had the earpiece. He was getting information from his wife backstage via the radio transmissions. And Randy put him out of business effectively only for a while. Peter Popoff is back and still making millions of dollars. It's frustrating, but it's sadly people just keep on believing.
It is unbelievable. Some people are gullible, but some people believe, and I don't know who am I to take who are we to take their dreams away? Richard Saunders is with me. Andrew is online. Andrew, g'day.
Yeah, good evening. How are you?
Yeah, I'm good, Andrew.
Oh, good morning, actually.
Yeah, good morning. You wanted to talk to Richard?
Yeah, I just wanted to state the obvious. If these psychics know everything, why do they have to advertise and have websites and advertisements in the paper? Surely they've already worked out the lotto numbers and,
They know the winner at Moonee Valley?
Yeah, the Melbourne Cup, I can tell you right now who's going to win.
Yeah.
This year, it's going to be a big brown horse.
Oh, wow.
You're good.
I'm very good, mate.
Andrew, you're on fire.
Yeah.
Andrew, let me give you the answer that they always give me when I put a similar question to them. They'll say, "Oh, you don't understand. It doesn't work like that." And that's all they need say. That's all they need say, and it's like a big get-out-of-jail-free card for them. Of course they don't come up with the lotto numbers. They should, shouldn't they?
Well, not just the lotto numbers. I mean, everything. If you are psychic, my first question would be: where's MH370?
It's a good point. Absolutely good point. And there's a lot of so-called psychics out there posting on websites saying, "Oh, we think it's here, we think it's there, we think it's there." They don't know.
Jim from Cairns is online. G'day, Jim.
Good morning. How are you?
Well, I'm good. How are you, Richard?
Hello.
Hello, Richard. Can you hear me all right?
Yeah, I can hear you loud and clear all the way from San Francisco.
Good. Listen, Richard, I wanted to talk to you about a near-death experience that a young fellow I went to school with many years ago had.
Yeah.
It was back in the late 70s at Woy High, and we were dissecting some rats, and this young fellow happened to look into the garbage bin full of anaesthetised rats and fell forward into it, and we had to drag him out. Do you remember anything about that?
Good God, that was me.
That was you.
Oh, Jim, you went to school with Richard, did you?
I did. James Murdoch from Woy High back in the late 70s.
That was actually 1983-84, but you're close.
Was it? Okay.
Yeah, we were doing an experiment on rats, and I don't know if they still do that to poor old rats, but at the time, and we were sent back to get some, and I was a little overcome. And
face forward into the business, I remember. We had to drag you out, you poor lad.
and I woke up going, what the hell's going on?
Exactly.
I don't quite remember dying, but
well, it did run past our mind as young boys do to dissect you at the time, I think, but that was a pretty horrible thing to do. But anyway, it's nice to hear from you again, and good to see you doing well.
Thank you very much, mate. Those were. It's a long time ago, but there you go. I wonder what happened to those poor old rats. I don't remember.
Oh, they're long gone. Good on you. How's Cairns this morning, Jim?
Oh, lovely. About 14 degrees.
Is it?
Beautiful.
Yeah, your overnight low was 18, expected to be 18, so it should be warmer than that.
Well, it probably is. There's been a little bit of rain. I haven't actually checked the temperature. I've still got a jumper on. We think it's cold. But,
yeah. You think it's cold. You think 18. You think 18 degrees is cold. You're getting up to 25 today. Good on you, Jim. Thanks for the call. That was
no
good.
worries. Thanks, Luke. Bye.
That was good fun, Richard. 1332. Richard, if somebody gets a reading from a psychic, and there are plenty of people listening who are probably planning on doing it in the not too distant future. A lot of people have a regular person that they go to for reassurance, I suppose. And the most common questions are money, love, and work, aren't they?
Yeah, health, money, love, work, that sort of thing. If people want tips, always record your psychic reading. Take a little MP3 recorder or whatever that you may have. Your phone often records things these days.
Yes.
Another tip is don't answer questions. If a psychic is asking you questions, well, I can ask you questions. Anybody down the street can ask you questions. The whole idea about the psychic is they should be able to glean knowledge using mystical powers and not have to ask you. And the other thing is ask them questions. If you're going for a psychic reading, turn up and say, here's a question for you. What was I doing in high school in 1983? Or something like that, and see if they can answer your questions to your satisfaction. It's amazing how many people will forget after a reading happened, and when they hear their recording back, they're often quite shocked, is how many times the psychic simply asked them for the information. It's gobsmacking. They're my tips.
So the psychic will ask you questions about yourself, and you sort of end up telling them.
Absolutely.
And then they will say, okay, for example, let's say you're trying to get in touch with your father who's passed away, and the psychic will say, your father was a loving person. You had a very good, close relationship with your father. Well, I suppose if you wanted to know about your father and you were grieving, especially years after he'd passed away, it's pretty obvious you were close to your father.
Yeah, but it's interesting. What they'll often do is they'll couch it in terms like, if you're sitting on the other side of the table, they say, I'm getting an energy coming through to me. They're telling me, it's a bit unclear, they're telling me it's a father figure. It's a father figure. Can you relate to that? And you might say, yes, my father passed away. Later on, when you're retelling the reading, you'll say, oh, Richard Saunders, I went for a reading and he knew my father passed away. You see that? Whereas, in matter of fact, you told me the information.
Yeah, and then if it wasn't your father, it could have been an uncle who could be then described as a father figure.
Yes, an uncle, a good friend, an older relative, all of those can come into the sphere of father figure. And there are so many ways that people can ask questions like that. It's a fascinating topic of study.
Yeah, it is interesting. Well, good on you, Richard. You've been very, very interesting. I'll talk to you again. We'll catch up again soon. Maybe you can come into the studio one morning and bend some spoons for me.
My pleasure, Luke. And just before I go, and the famous just before I go, the Australian Skeptics have a major convention in Sydney in November. We're flying people from all around the world. We have a $100,000 challenge to the first psychic who can prove their chops, and people can find out more at skeptics.com.au.
So you will pay $100,000.
Yep. All they have to do is prove their claim. If they say they can talk to the dead, we'll sit down with them and come up with a mutually agreed test where they can show us and the world, more importantly, that they can talk to the dead. If they say they can do water divining or water dowsing, we'll let them show us how they can do it. And if they can do that to the satisfaction of not us, but a mutually agreed independent umpire under a fair test, bammo, they get $100,000.
See, why doesn't John Edward line up?
Because he makes more money doing the circuit as it is.
All right.
There's absolutely, economically, there's no point for him to do it.
All right. Good to talk to you, Richard. Thanks for that.
Thanks, Eric.
Thanks for your call. Richard Saunders from the Australian Skeptics Association, phoning in from San Francisco, just listening to us online. And I appreciate his time. I've got to tell you, though, this woman I spoke to in Canberra was very impressive. She knocked me for 6. So I'll keep my mind open, I think.
Hey guys, this is Jay from the Skeptic's Guide to the Universe. And whoa, hold on, whoa! Everybody knows I'm the only reason to listen to the freaking show, right? I mean, if it was up to me, the show would start with this. Yeah, boy! Well, Rebecca would hate that, probably, but I mean, I'd rock that. Listen to our show and you can learn about cool stuff like a technological singularity, which is someday when technology progresses so fast that it would make the Industrial Revolution look like a kid's science project. Anyway, come check us out at www.theskepticsguide.org and get your science on!
Thank you for listening to the Skeptic Zone. Well, I'm looking around the room now thinking, what shall I pack? What shall I take to the amazing meeting in Las Vegas? I'll be flying out in a few days. Oh, Las Vegas this time of the year, folks. In fact, I've been going there now for 7 years or something. It's like walking into a microwave oven. Woof! I don't know how people live there all year. I guess they just live in the air conditioning. But the amazing meeting will be the time I officially launch the Vaccination Chronicles documentary, and after that I'll be letting everybody know the URL where you can check it out for yourself. It runs at exactly 27 minutes. It's been an interesting job making something fit exactly into 27 minutes to the frame, editing here and there, expanding this bit, cutting this bit and altering that bit, but that's all part of documentary making. And of course the amazing meeting is only a warm-up to the Australian Skeptics National Convention in Sydney in November, where the Skeptic's Guide to the Universe will be there, and George Raab, Dr. Raichi, and lots of people. We're still finalising a lot of that. It's still many months away, of course, but it's never too early to buy your ticket, especially now since the prices have fallen considerably and we've got concession tickets available and things like that. Check it out, www.skeptics.com.au, or better yet, convention.skeptics.com.au. Either one will work. But until next week, where the show will go out from the amazing meeting, that'll be show number 299. Wow. This is Richard Saunders signing off from the San Francisco Bay Area.
You've been listening to the Skeptic Zone. Visit our website at www.skepticzone.tv for comments, contacts, and extra video reports.